The late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the bustling streets of a picturesque coastal town. Nestled in the heart of the promenade stood Café Haven, an upscale eatery known for its artisanal coffee and European-style pastries. Its manager, Leonard Grayson, was a man of middle age with neatly combed hair and a reputation for being meticulous to a fault. While the cafe's gleaming counters and elegant decor impressed most visitors, Leonard's attitude was not always as polished. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. It was a quiet Tuesday when David Monroe walked into Café Haven. Dressed in a simple gray t-shirt and well-worn jeans, David exuded a quiet confidence. His stature was imposing, with broad shoulders and a firm posture, though his demeanor was calm and unassuming. As a Navy SEAL, he was no stranger to scrutiny, but he had long since learned to navigate situations with grace and composure. David approached the counter, scanning the menu written in elegant chalk script. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of cinnamon from the pastries on display. He waited patiently, his eyes meeting those of Leonard, who had been observing him with a cold, calculated gaze. "Can I help you?" Leonard finally asked. His tone clipped. "Yes, I'd like a black coffee, please," David replied with a polite smile. Leonard hesitated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This isn't a diner." David blinked, caught off guard. "I'm in the right place. Just the coffee, please." There was an awkward pause as Leonard's expression hardened. Without another word, he turned to prepare the order. A few customers seated at nearby tables exchanged glances, sensing the tension. When Leonard returned with the coffee, he set it down with a little too much force, causing some of the liquid to slosh onto the saucer. "That'll be $5, Leonard said tersely. David handed over a $10 bill, but before he could ask for change, Leonard pointed to the door. "You might want to take that outside. We have a certain ambiance here, and I don't think you fit in." For a moment, the cafe seemed to hold its breath. David stared at Leonard, his calm facade cracking just enough to reveal the disbelief in his eyes. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice steady but firm. "You heard me," Leonard said, folding his arms. "I reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. I think you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." A hush fell over the room. The other patrons sat frozen, unsure whether to intervene or pretend they hadn't heard. David set his coffee down slowly, his jaw tightening. "Are you asking me to leave because of the color of my skin?" David asked evenly, his gaze locking with Leonard's. Leonard scoffed, though his cheeks flushed. "Don't make this about race. This is my establishment, and I decide who stays and who goes." David's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a young woman at a nearby table stood up. "Excuse me, but this is unacceptable," she said, her voice trembling with indignation. "You can't treat someone like this just because you think they don't belong." Leonard turned to her, his expression a mixture of annoyance and defiance. "This is none of your business, miss. If you don't like how I run things, you're welcome to leave as well." More murmurs spread among the customers, and a middle-aged man in a suit stood up next. "Actually, I think this is everyone's business," he said. "What you're doing is discriminatory and wrong." David raised a hand to silence the growing uproar. "It's fine," he said calmly, though his voice carried an edge. "I'll leave." As he turned to go, the young woman followed him. "Wait!" she called, catching up with him outside. "You shouldn't have to put up with that. He can't treat people like that. It's illegal." David smiled faintly, though there was a sadness in his eyes. "Thank you for speaking up, but people like that don't change overnight." The woman frowned. "What are you going to do?" David looked back at the cafe, then at the horizon where the ocean glittered under the afternoon sun. Sometimes actions speak louder than words. The next day, David returned to the cafe, but he wasn't alone. This time, he was accompanied by several fellow Navy SEALs, all dressed casually, but carrying an undeniable air of authority. Among them was Commander Rachel Blake, a charismatic leader with a sharp mind and an even sharper sense of justice. As they entered the cafe, the room fell silent. Leonard, who had been chatting with a regular customer, froze mid-sentence. His eyes darted between David and the imposing group behind him. "Can I help you?" Leonard asked, his voice faltering slightly. David stepped forward, his expression calm but resolute. "I'd like to speak to you outside." Leonard hesitated, glancing nervously at the other patrons. "I'm busy right now." "Now," David said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, Leonard followed David and the SEALs to the sidewalk. A small crowd began to gather, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. "Do you know who I am?" David asked once they were outside. "You're the guy I asked to leave yesterday," Leonard replied, though his voice lacked the bravado it had carried before. "I'm a Navy SEAL. David said, his voice steady but firm. "I've served this country for over a decade. I've risked my life to protect the freedoms you take for granted, including the freedom to run this business, and yet you treated me like I was less than human." Leonard's face paled. "I didn't," David held up a hand. "Save your excuses. This isn't about me. It's about the principles we claim to stand for. Treating people with respect, dignity, and equality shouldn't be optional." By now, the small crowd had grown larger, with passers-by stopping to watch. Some took out their phones, recording the confrontation. Commander Blake stepped forward, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Mr. Grayson, discrimination is not just morally reprehensible, it's against the law," she said. "This community deserves better than a business that tolerates such behavior." Leonard shifted uncomfortably, his gaze darting around. "Look, I might have been a little harsh, but..." "No," David interrupted. "This isn't about being a little harsh. It's about accountability, and now the whole town knows." Leonard opened his mouth to respond, but the sight of several customers exiting the cafe with angry expressions stopped him. "We won't be coming back," one of them said loudly, glaring at Leonard. Others nodded in agreement, voicing their disapproval as they walked away. David turned to the crowd. "Thank you for standing up for what's right," he said. "It's people like you who make change possible." As the crowd began to disperse, Leonard stood alone, his face a mixture of anger and humiliation. David gave him one last look, a silent reminder that respect is earned, not demanded, before walking away with his team. In the weeks that followed, Café Haven saw a dramatic decline in business. Word of Leonard's actions had spread quickly, fueled by social media and local news coverage. Customers boycotted the cafe, leaving its once busy tables empty. Eventually, Leonard was forced to step down as manager, and the cafe was sold to new owners who promised to create an inclusive and welcoming environment. David, meanwhile, became a symbol of resilience and integrity in the community. He continued his service as a Navy SEAL, but also found time to speak at local schools and events, sharing his experiences and advocating for equality. The incident at Café Haven became a turning point for the town, a reminder that standing up against injustice, no matter how small the act, could spark meaningful change. And for David, it was a testament to the power of perseverance and the enduring belief that respect and dignity should be the right of everyone, not a privilege granted to a select few. The events surrounding Café Haven rippled through the town with a resonance that no one could have anticipated. What began as a moment of quiet discrimination quickly grew into a catalyst for reflection, conversation, and ultimately, change. People began to question not just Leonard Grayson's actions, but the broader societal undercurrents that had allowed such behavior to persist unchecked for so long. David Monroe, though reluctant to be thrust into the spotlight, found himself at the heart of this transformation. The humility that had defined his career as a Navy SEAL now became the cornerstone of his role as an unexpected advocate for equality. He hadn't sought attention, but the town's growing admiration for him was undeniable. Invitations poured in for interviews, community discussions, and panels. Initially hesitant, David realized that his voice could inspire others to confront their own biases and take action against discrimination. Standing at the front of the room, David felt the weight of countless eyes on him. Public speaking wasn't his forte. His battlefield had always been physical, not verbal. But as he looked around, he saw faces filled with hope and determination. Drawing on his training, he steadied his breathing and began to speak. "I didn't come here to be a hero," he said, his voice strong but measured. "I came here for a cup of coffee. What happened that day wasn't just about me, it was about all of us. Discrimination in any form doesn't just hurt the person it's directed at, it erodes the fabric of our community. We have a choice to make. Do we let it continue, or do we stand together and say, 'Not here, not anymore'?" Applause erupted, but David raised a hand to quiet the crowd. "This isn't about applause," he continued. "It's about action. Change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because people like you, people who care, decide to make it happen." The room buzzed with energy as attendees began sharing ideas for initiatives to combat prejudice and foster inclusivity. One resident suggested hosting cultural appreciation events at local businesses. Another proposed workshops for small business owners on diversity and customer service. A teacher stood up to advocate for anti-bias education in schools, emphasizing the need to reach children early. David's words became a rallying cry, and the town's momentum only grew. Café Haven's new owners, an interracial couple named Maria and Alan Patel, embraced the opportunity to turn the space into a symbol of unity. They renamed it Unity Grounds and revamped the menu to include dishes and beverages inspired by cultures from around the world. The cafe quickly became a hub for community events, including open mic nights, art exhibits, and panel discussions on social justice. One evening, Unity Grounds hosted a storytelling night centered on personal experiences with discrimination and resilience. David was one of the featured speakers, but it was the stories of others that truly moved the audience. An elderly woman shared her memories of marching for civil rights in the 1960s. A young man recounted his struggles with bullying due to his mixed heritage. A local high school student spoke about the challenges of being the only black girl in her class and how she hoped to inspire her peers to embrace diversity. These stories, raw and heartfelt, brought tears to many eyes. The event ended with a spontaneous moment of solidarity as everyone in the room joined hands and vowed to work toward a more inclusive community. Meanwhile, Leonard Grayson's downfall served as a cautionary tale. Stripped of his position and ostracized by much of the town, he initially retreated into bitterness and denial. However, the backlash forced him to confront his actions and their consequences. After weeks of reflection and a few pointed conversations with family members who condemned his behavior, Leonard decided to seek redemption. He began attending workshops on racial sensitivity and implicit bias, determined to unlearn the prejudices that had shaped his worldview. Leonard's journey wasn't easy, nor was it met with universal forgiveness. Some people remained skeptical of his intentions, while others chose to withhold judgment and watch his actions over time. He volunteered to help with community projects, quietly lending his hands to causes he once might have ignored. Slowly, the town began to see glimmers of genuine change in him. While he might never fully erase the harm he had caused, Leonard's efforts to make amends became another layer in the story of transformation. The broader impact of the incident extended beyond the town's borders. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a microcosm of the larger struggle against systemic racism. Social media amplified the narrative, with hashtags like #StandWithDavid and #UnityInAction trending for weeks. Activists, educators, and policymakers reached out to David for his insights, seeing in him a powerful example of how ordinary moments can become extraordinary catalysts for change. David, true to his nature, redirected much of the attention toward the community rather than himself. "I'm just one person," he often said. "This is about all of us working together." The town's efforts culminated in the establishment of the Unity Center, a new community hub dedicated to promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. Funded by donations from residents and grants from organizations inspired by the town's story, the Unity Center offered a range of programs, from cultural workshops and language classes to mentorship opportunities and advocacy training. The center's walls were adorned with artwork created by local students, depicting scenes of unity and hope. David became a frequent visitor to the Unity Center, often sitting down with students to discuss their dreams and challenges. One teenager, Marcus, confided in him about his aspiration to join the Navy, but expressed doubts about whether he had what it took. David listened intently, then shared stories of his own struggles and triumphs. "You don't have to be perfect to succeed," David told Marcus. "You just have to be willing to give it your all and never stop believing in yourself." Marcus took those words to heart, and years later, when he graduated from boot camp, he credited David as his inspiration. The ripple effects of that fateful day at Café Haven continued to unfold in ways both big and small. Friendships were formed across cultural divides, schools incorporated more inclusive curricula, and businesses began to prioritize diversity in hiring and training. The town, once content with its surface-level harmony, had become a beacon of genuine progress. David, though deeply proud of the changes he had witnessed, remained grounded. He often reflected on the irony of his journey, that a simple act of discrimination had led to a movement that touched so many lives. Yet he never lost sight of the work that still needed to be done. One day, as he walked past Unity Grounds, he saw Maria and Alan setting up for another event. They waved him over, inviting him to join a discussion on allyship and advocacy. Inside, the cafe buzzed with energy, filled with people from all walks of life who had come together to share ideas and stories. As David looked around, he felt a profound sense of hope. The world wasn't perfect, and progress wasn't always linear. But moments like these, moments of connection, understanding, and shared purpose, reminded him why the fight for equality was worth it. For David and the town, the journey wasn't over. It never would be. But they had proven that even in the face of ignorance and adversity, change was possible. And for that, they were willing to keep moving forward, one step and one cup of coffee at a time. The transformation of the town became a compelling story of resilience and progress. But it was also a lesson in the complexity of human relationships and societal change. As Unity Grounds flourished and the Unity Center became a hub for meaningful dialogue, David Monroe realized that the real work was far from over. What had happened at Café Haven was a turning point, but it wasn't a solution. It was the beginning of a process that would require patience, persistence, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. One of the most significant challenges the town faced was ensuring that the changes taking root were sustainable. It was easy to rally around a dramatic incident, but the real test lay in maintaining that momentum when the initial spark of outrage and inspiration began to wane. David knew this better than most. Having spent years in the Navy SEALs, he had learned that victories weren't just about the moment of triumph, they were about what came after. The same held true for societal progress. David understood that addressing these concerns required a careful approach. Confrontation could backfire, deepening divides rather than bridging them. Instead, he focused on fostering understanding. Alongside Maria and Alan Patel, as well as other community leaders, he organized a series of listening circles at Unity Grounds. These gatherings provided a safe space for people to share their perspectives, even if they disagreed with the direction the town was taking. These listening circles didn't resolve every conflict or change every mind, but they planted seeds of empathy. Over time, the sessions grew in popularity, becoming a cornerstone of the town's efforts to build a more inclusive community. Meanwhile, the Unity Center expanded its reach, launching programs designed to address the root causes of inequality. One of the most impactful initiatives was the Youth Empowerment Program, which paired teenagers with mentors from diverse backgrounds. David became one of the program's most dedicated volunteers, often spending hours with his mentee, a bright but introverted boy named Elijah. Elijah had been struggling in school, not because he lacked ability, but because he lacked confidence. Growing up as one of the few black students in his predominantly white school, he often felt invisible, or worse, singled out. David saw in Elijah a reflection of his own younger self, and he made it his mission to help the boy see his own potential. Through their weekly meetings, discipline, resilience, and self-belief. But he also listened, creating a space where Elijah felt seen and heard. Over time, Elijah's demeanor began to change. He stood a little taller, spoke a little louder, and dared to dream a little bigger. One afternoon during a hike at a nearby nature reserve, Elijah confided in David that he wanted to pursue a career in engineering. "But what if I'm not good enough?" he asked, kicking at a rock on the trail. David stopped and placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "Let me tell you something," he said. "Every great achievement starts with someone daring to believe in themselves. You have everything it takes to succeed. The only person who can stop you is you." That conversation marked a turning point for Elijah. With David's encouragement, he applied for a prestigious summer STEM program and was accepted. At the end of Summer Showcase, Elijah presented a project he had designed, a prototype for a portable water filtration system. As he stood on stage explaining his invention to an audience of peers, educators, and community members, David watched with pride, knowing that this moment was only the beginning for the young engineer. The town's journey also had a profound impact on its schools. Teachers began integrating lessons on social justice and cultural history into their curricula, ensuring that students learned not just about historical milestones, but also about the ongoing struggles for equality. Field trips to the Unity Center became a regular part of the school calendar, exposing students to diverse perspectives and encouraging them to think critically about their own roles in shaping the future. One particularly memorable field trip involved a group of middle schoolers who participated in a workshop on storytelling and identity. The students were asked to write about a time when they had felt excluded or misunderstood, then share their stories with their peers. The exercise revealed a surprising depth of vulnerability and insight. A girl who had recently immigrated from Brazil spoke about her struggle to learn English and fit in. A boy who had been teased for his love of ballet shared how he had almost given up on his passion. Their classmates listened intently, their initial discomfort giving way to compassion. This spirit of interconnectedness extended to the town's cultural celebrations. The annual Harvest Festival, once a modest affair featuring pumpkin carving and hayrides, was transformed into a vibrant showcase of the town's diversity. Booths representing different cultures lined the streets, offering everything from Mexican tamales to Ethiopian coffee. Performances by local artists filled the air with music, dance, and storytelling. David, ever humble, spent most of the festival helping behind the scenes. But when Maria and Alan insisted he take the stage for a few words, he couldn't refuse. Standing under the glow of string lights, surrounded by a crowd of familiar faces, he spoke from the heart. "This festival is proof of what we can achieve when we come together," he said. We're not just celebrating our differences, we're celebrating the strength they bring to our community. Let's carry this spirit forward, not just tonight, but every day." The crowd erupted in applause, and as David stepped off the stage, he was met with hugs, handshakes, and words of gratitude. Among those waiting to thank him was Leonard Grayson. Leonard's journey toward redemption had been slow and often painful, but he had persisted. That night, he approached David with a look of sincerity. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. "Not just for what I did to you, but for all the harm I caused by holding on to ignorance. I've spent my whole life thinking I was better than others, but now I see how wrong I was. Thank you for giving this town, and me, a chance to change." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Change isn't easy," he said, "but the fact that you're here saying this means something. Keep doing the work." Leonard's words were a reminder that transformation was possible, even for those who seemed most resistant. His story became a quiet but powerful example of the ripple effects of accountability and compassion. As the years went on, the town continued to evolve. Its story attracted visitors and inspired other communities to embark on their own journeys toward inclusivity. Unity Grounds and the Unity Center became symbols of what could be achieved when people chose to stand together against prejudice and embrace the richness of their differences. David, though never one to seek the limelight, became a local legend. But to him, the true measure of success wasn't the accolades or the recognition, it was the lives that had been touched and the lessons that had been learned. Whether mentoring a young dreamer like Elijah, sharing a quiet moment with an old friend like Leonard, or simply enjoying a cup of coffee at Unity Grounds, he knew that the real victory lay in the countless small acts of courage and kindness that had brought the town to this point. The town's transformation reached far beyond the visible changes in its landscape or the establishment of Unity Grounds and the Unity Center. What began as an intense reckoning with discrimination deepened into a sustained cultural shift that touched every aspect of life in the community. New challenges arose, and with them came opportunities to grow stronger, more united, and more resilient. David Monroe continued to play a pivotal role, not as a figurehead, but as a humble participant in a collective journey. One of the most profound developments was the integration of restorative justice practices into the town's schools, courts, and community organizations. Inspired by the transformative effects of the listening circles, town leaders, educators, and justice advocates began exploring how similar principles could be applied to address conflicts and inequities on a larger scale. David was invited to mediate the process, not as a judge but as a mentor who could guide the students and the affected parties through a series of dialogues. Over several weeks, the students met with community members, business owners, and residents impacted by their actions. They listened as people shared stories of hurt and anger, but also of hope and resilience. The students were encouraged to reflect on the harm they had caused and to take steps toward making amends. One student, a boy named Ethan, initially resisted the process, claiming that the graffiti was just a joke. But as he sat across from an elderly shop owner whose storefront had been defaced, his attitude began to shift. The shop owner, a Holocaust survivor, recounted the pain of seeing hateful symbols reappear in a place he had worked so hard to build as a refuge. "I thought we were past this," the man said, his voice trembling. "But maybe we're not, and that scares me." Ethan's defenses crumbled. "I didn't think about it like that," he admitted. "I didn't think about how it would make someone feel. I'm sorry." The restorative process didn't erase the harm, but it led to genuine accountability. The students spent weeks cleaning and repainting the building, working alongside the shop owner and other volunteers. By the end of the project, they had not only repaired the physical damage, but also forged unexpected connections with the community they had initially disrespected. The success of the initiative encouraged the town to expand its restorative programs. Local businesses began using similar practices to resolve workplace conflicts, and community leaders established a restorative justice council to address broader issues of inequality and systemic bias. These efforts didn't just address individual incidents. They created a culture of accountability, empathy, and collaboration. Meanwhile, Unity Grounds continued to thrive as a beacon of inclusivity and creativity. Its monthly open mic nights became legendary, drawing performers and audiences from neighboring towns. On one particularly memorable evening, a young poet named Amara took the stage. Her piece, titled "We Are More," was a searing yet hopeful reflection on identity, belonging, and the power of collective action. "We are more than the labels they give us," she recited, her voice resonating through the cafe. "More than the scars we carry, the fears we hide. We are the builders of bridges, the dreamers of futures. Together we rise." The audience erupted in applause, many moved to tears. Amara's poem became an anthem for the town's ongoing journey, and her words were later engraved on a plaque outside the Unity Center. Beyond the town's borders, the story of its transformation continued to inspire others. Representatives from other communities visited to learn about the programs and practices that had made such a profound impact. Unity Grounds and the Unity Center became training grounds for activists, educators, and policymakers seeking to replicate the town's success. David often led workshops, sharing his insights while emphasizing the importance of grassroots efforts. Change doesn't come from the top down, he would tell attendees. It starts with individuals, ordinary people who decide to make a difference. That's what happened here, and that's what can happen anywhere. David's influence extended to his work with veterans. Drawing on his own experiences, he helped establish a support network for veterans of all backgrounds, creating spaces where they could share their stories and connect with others who understood their struggles. The network also partnered with the Unity Center to provide workshops on topics such as navigating post-military life and addressing mental health challenges. One of the most impactful events was a storytelling night where veterans shared their journeys. David opened the evening with a story from his time as a Navy SEAL, not about a mission, but about a moment of vulnerability, when he had doubted himself and found strength in the support of his team. "We all carry our battles," he said, "but we don't have to carry them alone." The veterans' stories resonated deeply, not just with each other, but with the broader community. The event fostered a sense of connection and mutual understanding, reminding everyone that strength comes in many forms. As the years passed, the town continued to evolve, facing new challenges and opportunities. The Unity Center launched a scholarship program for underrepresented students, providing financial support and mentorship to help them pursue higher education. Elijah, David's mentee, became one of the first recipients, using the scholarship to attend a prestigious engineering school. He often returned to the town to share his progress and mentor younger students, paying forward the support he had received. Leonard Grayson, the former cafe manager whose actions had ignited the town's transformation, also continued his journey of redemption. He became an advocate for racial equity, using his story as an example of how ignorance could be unlearned and replaced with understanding. Though not everyone forgave him, Leonard's sincerity and commitment to change earned him respect from many. For David, the greatest reward was seeing how the town had grown, not just in its outward appearance, but in its spirit. What had once been a community content with surface-level harmony had become a vibrant, dynamic place where differences were celebrated and challenges were met with courage and collaboration. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on a racist cafe manager kicking out a black Navy SEAL? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching and see you next time.